name is Beth, and I am a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with codependency, self-worth, and eating disorders. Right there. So we are on step 3, and that is the power of surrender. Surrender, that's our favorite word, right? Never give up, never surrender. I'm kidding. So we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Romans 10:13 says, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Who? Everyone. Look at your neighbor and say, hello, everyone. Right? That's you. That's everybody. Everyone who calls on the Lord will be saved. So we just learned 2 really important things. When we call out, everyone, anyone who calls out will be saved. And he's always with us. He's right here. 2 very important things to remember. Our core question today is, what worth wounds do you carry, and how have these wounds impacted your relationships with God and others? So we love that good old quote that Casey gave us a couple of years ago for steps 1, 2, and 3, and it's, I can't, God can. I think I'll let him, right? And we get to step 3, surrender, and we're like, woohoo, yes, God, I think I will let you. I am going to let him. You know, we have to choose to let him. So we're like, okay, God, you got this. Here it is. It's all yours. What you going to do with it? Right? What you going to do with it? We can't wait on God. We have to choose to give him that thing, but we can't stand back and watch. We love to say, you know, God will move mountains in our lives, but he's going to hand us a shovel. And this is where the shovel comes into play, surrender. When we hand that thing over, and we have a habit of picking it back up too. We got to leave it there, and we got to start work. We got to work this process. Because you can hold on to it if you want to. You can sit down and wait and do nothing. But that's probably not going to work, because that's just not how God operates in our lives. So this is my personal collection. So how many times do we say, God, here you go. I'm going to give this to you. And then we pick them back up. And my sweet husband said, all the blue ones are at the top. And when I put them together, I wasn't thinking of color coordination or order of time. I was just putting them all together. And I will tell you, this is an extremely, extremely poor representation of my past 3.5 years with God. There should be enough chips on here to leave a breadcrumb trail out to my vehicle and back. So I'll be honest and say, very, very poor representation. Because each chip is a surrender chip, and then there's some victory chips at the bottom. Like I say, they're not quite in order. But it's like, okay, God, I'm going to give that thing to you. But then I pick it back up, and I carry it home with me. How many of you guys have done that? Mm-hmm. I didn't think I would be the only one. But you know, we give these things to God, and I'm like, man, I'm still dealing with that thing. I'm going to give it to him again. And I like to think that, you know, this doesn't represent failure. This represents success, because each one of these chips say, keep not quitting, keep not quitting, keep not quitting. So it's not a failure. It may be a setback, but it's not a failure. I'm not giving up, right? And today I want to talk with you a little bit about worth wounds. That was our core question. How do worth wounds impact our relationship with God and others? So I love to get into the Word and find out what God has to say about things. And there's so many wonderful stories in the Bible, so many life lessons that we can get just by reading his Word. So I love to dig in and find things that speak to me. And what spoke to me for this lesson was the healing of Naaman. Do you guys know who Naaman is? A few of you, maybe a few of you don't. He's not one of the more popular ones in there, but he's in there. If you're interested in his story, he is in 2 Kings chapter 5. So I'm just going to read a few scriptures, and I'm going to tell you what those scriptures mean to me. And I'm going to start at verse 1, and it's 2 Kings chapter 5. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. So right here we learn that Naaman was over the king's army. He is the highest ranking military commander. So he's probably the king's right arm. And the king loved Naaman because Naaman had brought him great victories. They had conquered Israel, Samaria, several territories around them. But the Bible says God gave Naaman these victories, and that gave Naaman favor with the king. So he's a mighty man. I'm sure he's quite the warrior, because back then when they went to war, they all picked up a sword and a shield and went into battle. So I imagine he's probably a really fit, athletic, very smart, very intelligent man, because he's the commander of the army, and he does have God on his side, but he's racked quite a few victories. But we learn that Naaman has leprosy. Leprosy, I don't know if you know anything about it, it's a very ugly disease. When I looked through this, I thought about putting some slides up, and I'm a hospice nurse, so I have seen some pretty ugly diseases and skin disorders. But I thought, I'm not going to put those pictures up because they're pretty rough. Leprosy can be pretty rough. It's a slow-growing bacteria. It affects the nerves, your skin, eyes, lining of the nose. And left untreated, which, back then, they did not have a cure. They did not have treatment for leprosy. It would result in the crippling of the hands, crippling of the feet, paralysis, and blindness. And if you had a certain strand of leprosy, it could cause death. So here's Naaman. He's the commander of this army. And he has this disease process that eventually is going to cripple him. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of people with leprosy. They don't have fingers. They're missing toes. Their faces look blistered. They go blind. So here's this great commander, but he knows his time is limited, because eventually this disease is going to take over his body, and he's not going to be able to do the job that he's currently doing. And ironically, I had to look this up because the Bible is just so beautiful. I thank God, the way he orchestrates everything, there's a meaning and a purpose for everything. The name Naaman actually means beauty. How ironic is that? When I looked that up, I'm like, here's a man whose face is going to rot off, and they're calling him beautiful. His name actually meant beauty. Okay, verse 2. So at this time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go to the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." So here's this little girl. She is a captor from Israel, so she's away from her family. She's away from her homeland. She's in a place that she doesn't know, with people she doesn't know. Technical difficulties? Yeah. All right, here we go. Switcheroozy. Okay. So here's this young maid. She's in a land she doesn't know, away from her family. But I'd like to think she's got forgiveness in her heart, because she sees Naaman and the struggle that he's in. And she says to her mistress, she's not even Naaman's servant girl, says to Naaman's wife, "I wish my master would go see the prophet in Israel." So she's got faith and forgiveness in her heart, and she's having compassion on him. And I would like to think that this little servant girl, and the prophet she's talking about is Elijah, I would like to think that maybe she has seen Elijah perform miracles, and she knows firsthand what's possible. She knows God's grace and power. And so she's just, hey, I wish he would go to the prophet. So all she did was speak up. Have you said to someone lately, I wish you would come with me to RA. You might get something out of it. Come hang out with me at church. One simple request. Many of you, if y'all come on Friday nights, you probably know Emily. That's my twin sister, if you haven't figured that out yet. And our brother Brian. Brian's been sober, I think, 6 years now. He started drinking when he was 14, struggled with alcohol and drugs for about 24 years. He had done AA, I don't know how many times, NA, I don't know how many of the A programs he had been involved in, and he was living at home with our parents. His wife had kicked him out. He wasn't allowed to see his kids. He had lost his job. He had lost his driver's license. He had been in and out of jail. And one day, my sister says to Brian, hey, we got a recovery program starting at church on Friday nights. Why don't you come with me? That one invite changed the trajectory of his life forever. So this one invite that this maid girl has put out there to her mistress is going to change Naaman's life forever. He doesn't know it yet, but just that one invite changes his path. So I just want you to think about that. So Naaman's wife, who could have just dismissed it and said, yeah, okay, yeah, they got prophets in Israel. Good for them. But she doesn't. She has just enough faith. She sees the twinkle in this little maid girl's eyes and says, okay, I'm going to tell my husband about it. What have we got to lose? So she says, Naaman, the servant girl, mentioned a prophet. So Naaman takes it a step further. He's got just enough faith. He mentions to the king. The servant girl from Israel says, there's a prophet who can heal me. Well, the king's got just enough faith. He says, okay, I'll send you a letter. So verse 4, it says, so Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. Go and visit the prophet. The king of Aram told him, I will send a letter of introduction for you and take to the king of Israel. So Naaman started out, carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel simply said, with this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy. So Naaman has faith in the little girl's words. The king writes the letter, and Naaman now must act. They didn't send for the prophet to come to Naaman. It says Naaman gathered his stuff and set out. Sometimes we have to move. You remember earlier I laid that thing down and waited for God to pick it up? Naaman had to act. He's got to go to where the prophet is. The prophet's not coming to him. So he packs up, loads up his chariots and his horses, and they head out to Israel. In verse 7 it says, when the king of Israel read this letter, he tore his clothes in dismay, and he said, am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he is just trying to pick a fight with me. So quite simply, the king of Israel's scared. He's like, oh man, they have sent this dude with leprosy. I can't heal him. So when I send Naaman home and he still has leprosy, they're going to attack us. They're going to take over the kingdom. They're going to kill us. There's no telling what they want, but I am being set up. So he tears his clothes and he's all in dismay. So what got missed was the prophet. I'm not sure what happened or how it happened, but it does say that Elijah found out that the king was in turmoil. In verse 8 it says, but when Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him. Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel. So Elijah's not worried. He's ready. He says, send him to me. Keep your shirt on, king. I got it. Send him to me. I'm who they're looking for anyway. Y'all missed a step, but I'm going to correct that for you. So here goes Naaman again. He's got to move. So Naaman went with his horses and his chariots and waited at the door of Elijah's house. So this just makes me giggle because I love to try and envision what's happening when I read these stories in the Bible, these accounts of what happened. So it says Naaman went with his horses and chariots. And you got to remember, he's got 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and I could imagine that just took up a lot of space, 10 sets of clothes. So when I see this, I'm thinking of Naaman at Elijah's door, probably with a servant and a guard. But that's not what it looked like. It said it had all of his chariots and all of his horses. So it looked like Raleigh Christmas Parade had pulled up in the cul-de-sac. So Elijah knows they are there. The whole neighborhood knows that Naaman and his horses and chariots and servants are there. There's no denying something's going on. So Naaman goes to the door, knocks. But get this, Verse 10, but Elijah sent a messenger out to him with this message: go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River, and then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy. Elijah did not even come out of the house. He peeks through the blinds. He knows they're there, but he doesn't come out. He sends a message. So, how does Naaman feel about that? Here's a mighty man of war. He's the king of the army over in Aram, and he just got a message. So Naaman, this is verse 11, became angry and stalked away. I thought he would certainly come out to meet me, he said. I expected him to wave his hand over this leprosy, call on the name of the Lord his God, and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus and Abana and the Phar better than any of the rivers in Israel? Why wouldn't I wash in them and be healed? So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. So what does that sound like to you guys? It sounds like worth wounds to me. Naaman says it right here. I expected him. So when these things didn't happen the way he wanted them to happen, he immediately got mad. This isn't what he expected. He wanted, Elijah to come out and just poof, and he was going to be healed, and they were going to celebrate, and Naaman was going to go home with all of his horses and chariots. And instead, he got a message. He didn't even get to see Elijah. And he's mad. I think I would be mad. We get in our head how things are going to play out. Okay, God, here you go. I want A, B, and C. And if you can't do it in that order, I will accept B, C, and A. But I'm watching. I know I do it. I'm not going to accuse y'all of anything. I'll speak for myself. So here we have Naaman, and he is now experiencing a run of emotions because he's got faith. He was expecting to be healed. Well, he's not healed. He doesn't see Elijah, and he's got to go dip in a river that he thinks is dirty water. So he's offended, worth wound. He's hurt, worth wound. He is upset, worth wound. And then he gets mad and walks away in a rage. So then, after he calms down just a little bit, he's still mad. He wants to compromise. Aren't the rivers of Damascus better? God, why do I have to do it this way? I don't want to sign up for a process group. Can't I just come on Friday night? I want to skip step 4. I don't want to write my inventory. Compromise. How many times have we done that? God, I want it this way. Compromise doesn't work very well. How do I know that? Have y'all heard of Jonah? He didn't want to go to Nineveh, but guess where Jonah ended up? Nineveh. God said, Jonah, I want you to go preach to my people in Nineveh. God, I'm not going. So he hikes out in a different direction. God says, Jonah, you're going to Nineveh. No, I'm not going to Nineveh. Gets in a boat, tries to get away from God. The sailors end up throwing him out of the boat into the sea, where a giant fish swallows him. And when the giant fish decides to spit him up, where does he spit him up? The shores of Nineveh. So compromise doesn't really work out to our favor more often than not, especially if God's got a plan and he's told you what that plan is. Stick to it. So when God says to you, call your sponsor or join that process group, reach out to your accountability partners. Keep coming to RA. Keep not quitting instead of, doing other things or finding excuses. Compromise. Do what God asks you to do. And these are simple things. That's the kicker. These are simple things. He's not asking you for a 2-week revival on the street corner. He's just saying, show up, do the next right thing. So verse 13, it says, Naaman's officers tried to reason with him and said, Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? Should you certainly obey him when he says simply, go and wash and be cured? So I'd like to think that Naaman's officers were his friends. They probably spent a lot of time together. So they're talking him off the ledge. They're like, come on, Naaman, stay with us. If he had told you to go fight a dragon and bring back the head of that dragon, you would have whipped your sword out and said, I'll be back in 2 days. I'll have the head of the dragon, and then I'll get my healing. Wouldn't have thought twice about it. because this was so simple. Just go and wash. Naaman couldn't comprehend it. But it wasn't about his strength or his abilities or his intelligence or his leadership. God was looking for his obedience. Go and wash 7 times in the Jordan. Simple. But Naaman's got to act that thing out in obedience. So, verse 14, it says, So Naaman went down to the Jordan River, and he dipped himself 7 times, as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. So they talk him into going. He goes down to the Jordan. He gets in, and he dips 7 times. What if he had walked away after 6? He would have walked away with that leprosy. God said do it 7 times. So when you pick up those surrender chips, that first one, and it doesn't take, and you have to pick up a second one, or a third one, or a fourth one. It may be God's waiting for you to get to number 7. Don't give up and be obedient. And it can be so simple. I said we make a big deal out of everything, or we expect something and we don't get it and we get mad and we walk away. Don't give up and be obedient. Walk it out. Keep not quitting. That's how Naaman was healed. He dipped 7 times in the Jordan River and he came out completely healed. As I say, it sounds so simple. But sometimes that's God. All he wants from us is just that first step, something simple. So tonight, or today, I keep forgetting it's lunchtime. The worth wounds, that was our core question tonight. So when things don't work out the way we think they should, and we get mad, and we get upset, we get angry, we're hurt. And sometimes it's hurt. Sometimes those things we're asking God for are near and dear to our heart. And when it doesn't happen the way we think it should, we get mad with him, and it affects our relationship with him. You're like, you know what? I just don't feel like praying today. I've got bad news. I don't feel like getting in touch with God right now. I don't feel like calling my sponsor because they were supposed to text me last night and they didn't, so I'm upset about it. I'm going to carry that worth wound with me. It's those little things. It's those little things that can creep in and change your mindset, get you knocked off the right path. But that's okay. We pick up another chip and we keep not quitting. We trip, we stumble, we fall, but we get back up and we be obedient. Amen? So I'm going to have the sound team play another song for us, and I'm going to invite you to stand with me, and I'm going to ask you, have you ever had a worth wound? Something didn't work out the way you thought it should. You've surrendered something to God and it's not working out the way you wanted it to. You're still fighting that thing. You're still asking God, where's my miracle? And you just want to bring it back to the altar one more time. I want to invite you to do that. But worth wounds, I know I have. I've gotten mad with God when things didn't work out the way I thought they should. Has anybody else done that? I got mad with him Friday. I've been fighting something for over 3.5 years, and I got bad news. And I was mad and I was upset, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep not quitting. Because what if the miracle is after the 7th dip and I'm at number 6? Right? So I want to encourage you, don't hold on to those worth wounds. We're human, we have emotions, and sometimes we let them get the best of us, just like Naaman did. Man, he was hot when Elijah wouldn't come out. And that's okay. But he didn't carry it home with him. He went to the Jordan River, and he was obedient to what God told him to do, and he got his miracle. He got his healing. So whenever they play the tape, I just want to invite you to come to the altar, lay down those worth wounds. If you need to ask God for forgiveness, if you've been mad with him or somebody else, and just lay it back down and don't pick it back up.
That's the kicker, man. I love to pick stuff back up. I'm learning how to leave stuff where I lay it because God does a better job than I do. Amen.